It's not really sustainable. But as manufacturing jobs continue to decrease as a share of what's actually in the economy, more and more people are either ending up, some people are ending up with creative jobs, but people are ending up with these service jobs. So someone is going from working on a line to being a greeter at Walmart with a huge reduction in salary associated along with that. And that's a huge problem. And it's a real challenge to be able to say, in the service jobs, the one thing I'll say, right, I cannot offshore my haircut. No matter how hard I try, I still have to be where the person is who's cutting my hair. I can't have somebody in India cut my hair for me unless I go to India. So it doesn't make it effective. So these jobs are going to be around. These jobs do not go away. Unlike with so many of the manufacturing jobs that have been lost, and which is a shame, and there are things you want to try to do to stop that. But there are more. But these service jobs can't be lost because it's providing the service to people. And also with an aging economy, more and more of these services are going to be necessary. So how do we deal with that? And how do we make these good jobs? Or at least how do we make them better jobs? How do we take and recognize the creativity and the value of the creative people and the creativity of people who are doing these jobs and reward them for it and make those jobs valuable? So that's an important thing that we're thinking about. A third area is we just call it the Mega Regions Project, and it's really understanding, right? The question has always been, Bessie talked a little bit about kind of how the various levels of government work. The real question is, what's the kind of real unit of economic activity that's meaningful? At some level, city doesn't cut it, but neither does province, and country doesn't even always work for what's going on. And mega region turns out seems to be this very effective kind of way of looking at units of economic activity. The thing about mega regions is they span, right, the continuum from incredibly urban to rural. It's all there. It's all part of it. It's all part of one big labor market, one big functioning economy. So what are these things and how do they really work? Because there's no governance structure for them. There's no, you have no mayor of a mega region. But yet these things seem to work. So how do they work and what's happening and what's going on with them there? The kind of last thing, as I said, I talked about some of the measurement stuff and what's going on. One of the other key things, one of that's really important, especially from the rural issues, one of the real problems with any of the rural issues is getting useful, meaningful data. StatCan does their best, and they run around and they collect, and they do the 1 in 5 households that gets the long form and all this, and they end up not releasing any useful information from anything smaller than something the size of Kingston. Because they say, well, no, it's disclosure information. We can't tell you anything about these people. So you've got a large chunk of the population, especially when you're talking about rural, pretty much the whole population, that you can get basically no information on, at least not from government sources. So the data itself and the data that's available, the way the data is collected and released, and the kinds of things that are happening are actually incredibly important. And going forward, to really be able to understand what's going on in these areas and what's happening in Prince Edward County versus what's happening in Orillia, or what's happening in God knows, in Thunder Bay even. You need to have better data for it. And so it's really tough. But how do you get that information? How do you get it in a way that you can meaningfully work with it, right? I mean, I'm still a stats guy. I mean, this stuff really matters. If you don't have good data, right, garbage in, garbage out, I can't tell a whole lot about what's happening, what's really going on in these areas if we don't have better data for it. So that becomes a critical issue going forward. As I said, just to kind of briefly summarize this, in my presentation, I said, right, there were 3 big things that rural regions need to do to be successful in the creative economy, and then the fourth magical one, the secret one, right? The big 3 were, one was to look big, the second is to act big, right? So thinking about the mega regions and how you work together and some of that stuff. The third is to use a shotgun and not a rifle, right? That it takes a bunch of little things. You can't go after the smokestack chasing and try to get the one big plant and expect that's going to work. It's 100 little things that actually work in the creative economy. And then the fourth, I always say, the secret one that I don't put on the slides, because people would laugh at me, but I said you have to be lucky. Small regions that are successful, and Dan is living proof. It has nothing to do with what Dan Taylor's done. It's how incredibly lucky he has been in Prince Edward County. But it's also the fact that he's reacted positively when the luck has presented itself, right? Chance favors the prepared mind, and so you not only have to be lucky, but you have to be prepared to be lucky and recognize that, in fact, luck has come your way. And that's also very important. So those were all of my things. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, I'm unlucky in having to follow 3 brilliant academics. I'll confine my comments today as a practitioner and as a community partner. I'm going to focus first on what's underway in terms of our activities related to the rural creative economy. And this group is actually the very first to be advised of a coming conference. We're working closely with Ontario East Economic Development, the province, with the Moynihan Centre, and with Pella CFTC, and we've scheduled the Rural Creative Economy from Theory to Practice Conference. It'll be taking place October 13th to 15th, and it'll begin here in Kingston, and then migrate over to Prince Edward County for a celebration of rural creativity. So please put that in your calendars. There's more to follow, agendas and details. Secondly, the Ontario East Economic Development Commission has formed the Creative Economy Sectoral Team, and Dan Taylor has been nominated leader of that, and they're underway right now, building on the Canada's Creative Corridor report that was funded by the Eastern Ontario CFTCs last year. They'll be analyzing all the massive amounts of data, looking at it and parsing it out to each municipality, but also looking forward as to creating toolkits. How does that report and how does the creative economy, how can it be used to assist economic developers in actually creating jobs and building communities? Also underway, and Kevin, I believe, is part of the Provincial Interministerial Creative Economy Committee. There's, I think, Dan, and actually I think Milan's part of that as well. It's charged with actually creating terminology, definitions, and scope of the creative economy here in Ontario, looking at how we move forward as a province. We're also working on right now on another SSHRC application for research that's being put together and hopefully be submitted later this fall. One of the components of this application will be the rural creative economy, and it'll involve Martin Prosperity Institute, probably Betsy as well as other researchers. Next on the list is actually the rural creative economy in Eastern Ontario. Dr. Chan, myself, and Dan Taylor have been invited to the University of Alberta's Centre for Sustainable Rural Communities, and we'll be making a presentation at their conference just after ours in October. Quite exciting. So the future. New partner engagement. I've long held the belief that one of the greatest resources, untapped resources in our community is academic research. And I believe one of the challenges is that there's lots of demand for help and there's lots of supply for solutions. Unfortunately, those networks often don't interlap. And that's one of the brilliant aspects of the Moynihan Centre, is bringing together community and research together to solve problems. But again, as we move forward, we need to build more partnerships and have more overlap of interconnecting networks. Municipal partnerships. Betsy and Kevin both spoke of the role of the municipal governance, and being a municipal councillor, I recognize that all too clearly, the challenges that we face, mostly financial, but also in service delivery. There's a great deal of challenge. Healthcare is now becoming an issue for rural communities and rural municipal councils. So interacting with groups like AMO, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, and the Ontario East Wardens Caucus is an important step in solving some of these challenges. We must begin to engage the Federal Development Agency of Southern Ontario. Many of you will be aware that in August of this past year, the Government of Canada created the Federal Development Agency of Southern Ontario. Unfortunately, they're not here. They need to be here. This is an organization, a multi-billion-dollar agency with huge resources, and I think should have something to say about the creative rural economy. The new Rural Ontario Institute, of which I am a director, was created out of TORC, the Ontario Rural Council. And this is a new organization that's looking to move forward, funded by OMAFRA. It's another partner that needs to be engaged. And of course, OMAFRA and the University of Guelph is something that's been engaged and is ongoing. From my perspective, and Pella CFTC and Pella Institute's perspective, research topics that interest us, one of the things that I think is a research PhD in the making is the Ontario East Rural Broadband Network project. This is a $150 million investment in Eastern Ontario broadband that's rolling out right now as we speak. I think the RFPs go out, or they're out. I think they're just about to be signed. Looking over to one of my colleagues any day now. But this is a project that is unparalleled in the history of Eastern Ontario, and certainly I would suggest might even rival the railroads and the Development and Confederation of Canada. This is that important. But it's also very important that this is not about eBay and faster downloading of illegal movies and